Can we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Snyder is not present. Commissioner Young?
Here.
Commissioner Cooney is not present. They both sent apologies. Vice Chair Davis?
Here.
Chair Keller?
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Here.
Are there
We
any
have a
changes
quorum.
to the then agenda?
Chair Keller, there are no changes to the agenda.
Great, thank you. Is there any general public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no general public comment
Okay,
today.
thank you very much. So we have the consent calendar,
Approval of the minutes. Move approval.
Second.
okay? And
Commissioner
first,
Young?
is there any public
Oh.
comment? No?
Oh, thank you. Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on the consent calendar either.
Thank you.
Okay, so roll call vote. Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
Chair Keller?
Yes.
All right.
So we'll have, thank you very much. So we'll have the presentation on the water supply, urban water management plan update, yeah.
So Ms. Showers is going to go ahead and lead this presentation for us, but just a reminder that we were here a month or two ago with the initial baseline demands for the urban water management plan. We've since refined those, and she's going to walk us through both the refined baseline demands and the demand envelope. So we're making good progress towards having our urban water management plan completed for the January 1 or the July 1 deadline.
Good morning, Chair Keller, Commissioners, and Councilmember Sneddon. My name is Jasmine Showers, here to present the Urban Water Management Plan Water Demand Update. And today I'll have an introduction, a brief reminder about baseline demands, go over the demand envelope, and then talk about demand management. The 2020 Enhanced Urban Water Management Plans remains our consolidated water supply planning document, and that lasts until 2050, so a horizon of 30 years. And as a reminder, it combined the long-term water supply plan with the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. And as Ms. Corey mentioned, we are required per California Water Code to prepare an urban water management plan every 5 years. The 2025 version is due July 1st of this year. And this was a good opportunity to reevaluate demands. And the updated baseline demands were presented on November 20th of last year to the Water Commission. Water demand planning includes uncertainties, and the city developed a demand envelope, which includes a range of 7 plausible water demand scenarios. There have been some changes since baseline demands were presented. Baseline demands now include the effect of water conservation programs and more detailed water loss. And if you remember, the 2020 baseline demands are higher than the updated demands. And one of the reasons why is that the 2020 baseline demand projections thought that there would be a significant demand rebound to 90% of pre-drought use. And that just isn't what we've been seeing in actual water use. This graph is showing actual water use in that dotted green line. And then the 2020 baseline is in blue, and the 2025 baseline is in black. And if you look at the green dotted line and the blue line together, you can see they're tracking really well together for a few years. And then as that baseline tries to reach pre-drought demand, it keeps going up. And then we've actually seen water use go down the past few years. And also, if you look at the middle of the graph, you can see where the 2025 demand projections start. And they're drawing from average water use from 2021 to 2024. And by 2050, the difference in the two demand baselines is 16%. So I'll expand on that. So on the left are the details for the 2020 baseline by 2050, and on the right is the 2025 baseline details. And the difference between the two is just in the potable demand projection. So by in the 2020, they thought that potable demand would be 12,500 acre feet per year. And now we're thinking it'll be more about 10,000 acre feet per year. So you can see that there's the same assumptions for recycled water use and sales to Montecito Water District. So by the end of those projections, the difference is about 3,000 acre feet per year. Baseline demand is the most plausible scenario, but demand projections include uncertainties. And that's why we develop a demand envelope. And that includes 7 scenarios that have the potential to either put upward or downward pressure on the city's future water demand. And these can also be thought of as a range of plausible water demand futures that may or may not occur. And for example, if the green dotted line represents actual water use, rapid job growth would be an upward demand pressure, and that would cause water demand to go up, while slow job growth would be a downward pressure and cause demand to go down. All of these demands build from baseline. So this graph on the right, again with the actual water use in the green dotted line, and then the baseline demand is in black. That graph will stay the same as I show each demand scenario. And each scenario is modeling a specific pressure, but it is likely that several pressures would build on top of each other. So that's why we create the upper and lower bound of the demand envelope to show how some scenarios are combined. So after going through each scenario, we'll present the upper and lower bound of the demand envelope. The first scenario you can see on the graph is in that purple line, and it's higher housing growth. This aligns with the RHNA numbers for the city, which includes 8,000 total units from 2023 to 2031. And as a comparison, in the city's housing element, they're aiming for about 3,100 units in that same time period. So this demand scenario assumes that the city will meet the projected RHNA numbers, and that means about 700 housing units per year. You have a question?
I do, thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Can you explain to me why the start of the 2025 baseline demand curve starts above the end of the green dotted line?
Yes, because the green is actual water use, and then the projections, had to start somewhere. So they're drawing from average water use from 2021 to 2024.
But 2021 to 2024, at least if I'm not reading this correctly, okay, so it is above a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of
okay,
the peak
got it,
of the
got it.
green line.
I was missing
and
that.
the-
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. 2021 is our recent highest water year,
Right.
so it kind of draws up
Got
that
it.
average.
I
The
missed-
reality is that they will have to connect, but the projection right now.
Right, I got it, it's the average.
Yeah,
What's RHNA?
that is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Thank you. So this higher growth is assuming that we can meet RHNA from 2025 to 2035. And the 2035 deadline is matching the city's housing assessment because they extended the deadline by 4 years to account for permitting. By 2050, this water demand scenario is 5% higher than baseline demand. Alternatively, we could have slower housing growth. And this assumes that external factors slow growth in the city and that the new units in the housing element, so those 3,100 total units, that those are built by 2050 instead of by 2035. And this is in the orange line on the graph, so below baseline there. And that is 1% lower than baseline demand.
Another question. How much of that housing is, more dense as opposed to, what's the assumption there?
Yeah, so drawing from actual permitting for the last few years, we did 68% multifamily, and the rest is single family. Next scenario is faster job growth. So you can see that on the green line. And that is a 20% increase in the baseline, as compared to baseline demand projections, commercial users. And by 2050, this has a 4% effect as compared to baseline, with demand being higher. The opposite is slow job growth, and this is a 20% decrease applied to the baseline demand projections commercial users. And this has the exact opposite effect. So you can see that in the red line on the graph. And this is 4% lower than baseline demand by 2050. Climate change impacts are shown in the blue line. And this is using data from CalAdapt, and is drawing from models that assume a business as usual scenario. And that is showing that emissions continue to rise until the year 2100. There is a projected temperature increase of 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit from 2025 through 2050. For every 1% temperature increase, for every 1 degree temperature increase, a corresponding 5% increase in outdoor demand was applied from 2025 to 2050. And by 2050, water demand in this scenario is 2% more than baseline demand. And the kind of orange line there in the bottom of the graph, you can see water rate impacts. The city adopted water rates from the 2024 water rate study, and that includes a 10.5% annual increase for 2025 and 2026, and then a 10% increase in 2027 and 2028. And we don't expect those large of increases to continue, so we assumed a 5% increase in out years. The city investigated different studies on price elasticity and selected a study showing a price elasticity of negative 0.11. So this means that for every 1% in water rate increase, demand will decrease 0.11%. So for our adopted 10% increase, we could assume that demand would decrease 1.1%. By 2050, water demand in this scenario is 11% less than baseline demand. And just to note that this is a pretty conservative way of looking at it, because it's applying that price elasticity factor every year until 2050. And likely there would be reactions from our water users, and there would be demand hardening. So it wouldn't likely go down this much. And we have demand creep, and that's the top blue line there. This scenario models an increase in per capita water use, returning to 10% higher than 2021 demand levels by 2030. And there's several plausible demand pressures that could increase demand at the same time. This is likely showing customer consumption that outpaces conservation, increased tourism, hotter temperatures, or the faster job growth. So since this demand naturally stacks on itself, it forms the upper bound of the demand envelope, and it's ending at 31% more water demand than baseline by 2050.
Hi, just a question.
Yeah.
It would be possible to look at, customers that had, previously higher consumption and then decrease because they adopted some conservation measure, we don't know exactly what, and do they rebound, just to get a sense of what the real rebound may be? Because my sense is once you adopt them, they're hardened. Your lawn is already changed, your home fixtures are already in place. Whatever thing was causing for, resulting in a high use, most people are not going back because there's no point. I mean, it's unusual. There's a few that may have changed their lawn and then went back to a green lawn, but I imagine that most of them don't. No? So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see if that's, you can see that from the previous consumption and the more recent one.
You'll have to, yeah, go ahead to think about it.
So we worked with Madaus Water Management Consulting Firm on the development of these demand scenarios, and they're really kind of experts in the state, and they have clients all up and down California and across the country, actually. And demand projections are really tough because you do have all of these pressures that are kind of pushing demands like both up and down. And so it is kind of this educated crystal ball exercise. And we definitely use their expertise to build this demand creep scenario. And Jasmine and I actually had a meeting specifically about this scenario because we're like, oh man, that looks pretty like, it's a high rise in demand. And at the end of the conversation, we definitely feel like this is plausible if you kind of had all of those upward pressures combining at once, almost a perfect storm to push demand up. All that to say that there isn't a good data-based metric on rebound. I think your suggestion of trying to look at customers who implement conservation measures before and after and like, does that stick, is a really good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just give you personal experience. 1986, when I did the master water plan, demand was 16,500 without recycle.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Then we had that drought in the late 80s, early 90s,
Yeah.
and it dropped all the way down to 9,000. But then it crept back up to 14. It took about 5 to 10 years, but the demand, when you said demand creep, I've seen demand creep. But institutionally,
Yeah.
right, it went from 16
Yeah.
to even at the max at 14.
Yeah.
And then we had the second drought, right,
Yeah.
the drought that showed here.
Yeah.
And again, that demand creep coming back is even lower. So we've been, case A
Yeah.
to show exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Thank you. So this slide is changing graphs. So still we have the green dotted line showing actual water use. Blue is the 2025 demand envelope, and gray is the 2020 demand envelope, just for context. So you can see how they compare. By 2050, in that upper band, so that demand creep scenario, including recycled water and sales to Montecito Water District, water reaches 16,580 acre feet per year. Yeah. And for context, this is most similar to 2013 actual water use. It's about 5% higher than that, but it also does include Montecito sales. The lower bound, we decided to combine the two scenarios that cause demand to decrease the most, which is water rates impact and slower job growth. And this results in a 15% lower than baseline in 2050. So again, including recycled water and sales to Montecito Water District, that would mean 10,770 acre feet per year. And that is most similar to actual water use in 2019. Right here. The demand envelope allows the city to track and adaptively manage its water supplies as water demand trends change over time. And to illustrate some of what we've already touched on with demands changing over time, this is showing the Santa Barbara population, production, and rainfall graph from 1989 to 2050. 1989 to 2025 is actual data, and then 2025 to 2050 is showing our projections. Population is in the purple line on the top, and 2025 population is over 93,000, and then it's projected to reach about 98,000 by 2050. And it's a pretty linear line over time. Water production isn't. It's much more reactive to over time. And production peaked in 1984, and this is just showing potable. Yeah, so, yeah, 16,825. And then in 2025, it's 9,930 acre feet per year. And then for context, we have this demand envelope. And again, this is just potable. It's ranging from, it's ranging from 8,240 acre feet to about 14,000 acre feet per year. And on the bottom of the graph, blue lines are showing rainfall, and then the orange is showing periods of drought. And I think this really illustrates one of the big uncertainties about demand projections is we don't know what will happen with the weather in the next 25 years. So that's why we didn't try. That's just question marks. And the 2020 EU WIMF outlines the city's adaptive management strategy. And this really allows us to make informed water supply decisions based on both changes in projected supplies and demands. This is the adaptive management matrix from the 2020 EU WIMF. On the left are the demand numbers in acre feet per year. And on the bottom, you can see the supply reduction percents. So currently, we are below phase one. And phase one is just tracking and managing demands, which we do. And phase two would mean that we start implementing our next supply, which would be desalination expansion. So that would be triggered at 13,000 acre feet per year of potable demand, or about 20% supply reduction. That would be mandatory. Phase three is actually turning on that expanded desal and using it. Phase four would mean that we need to start thinking of our next supply after that. And phase five would be implementing that next supply. So this, the demand envelope and this management matrix really helps us make decisions as we keep tracking demand. And that's the end of the presentation.
What other supplies would you be considering?
One would be even more expanded desal.
Okay.
That's the one I can think of. Any others?
Yeah, so the enhanced urban water management plan contemplated several new supplies, and expanded desalination was the one that penciled out in terms of both cost and environmental effect and social effects as being sort of the most feasible. And so that would be our next step. But the plan also contemplated either further expansion of desal, like Ms. Showers mentioned, or potable reuse. So there's different opportunities in the future.
Conservation, water conservation will also be not only an option, but probably be mandatory at that stage, no?
Yeah, and that's baked into the demands that Ms. Showers has presented today, and yeah, would have to continue into the future, exactly.
Yeah, like by phase five, it would be between 30 and 40% mandatory. Yeah.
Just a comment that after we went through this the last time and all the careful decisions about how to make this phased chart through the Water Commission, and how nice it is now to have those clear metrics to know what phase we're in and then what measures to take when we get to those phases instead of being reactionary at those times. So like this before took a while to understand the different phases, but now it's just so nice to
Very
be
clear,
able to tie back to it.
Thank you.
It'd be interesting what ChatGPT would do with this data to project the future. Anyway, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. Any public comment at this time?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on this item.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There's no action, so there's no vote on this one. So the next one is talking about the California aqueduct subsidence, which is also an important issue.
Yes, thank you, Chair Keller. So this is a topic that is becoming more and more top of mind, especially around the State Water Project. And We wanted to bring the item to the Water Commission today just to start providing some background and context because I think we'll be talking about it more in the future. And we're really starting to work with our other member agencies from the Central Coast Water Authority and the state water contractors on this issue kind of at the federal and state level in terms of looking for funding. So we'll have a recommendation at the end that we ask council to approve the mayor to recommend funding in the state budget. So an overview of the presentation, we'll just go over quickly what subsidence is, and then more specifically how it's affecting the California aqueduct, including the impacts. And then the California Department of Water Resources has created a California Aqueduct Subsidence Program, so we'll talk a little bit about what they're working on. They're really kind of taking the lead on this issue, including estimated costs, and then, like I said, we have a recommendation at the end. So what is subsidence? Subsidence is the gradual, often permanent settling of land or soil caused by natural processes and human activity. Often the human activity includes the removal of fluids from below the Earth's surface, so this is groundwater pumping. Also oil and gas extraction can have some effect on subsidence. What we're talking about in the Central Valley is primarily the pumping of groundwater. And as a result of those fluids being removed from the soil, the surrounding soils compact and cause the ground above it at the surface to compress and settle. And that's a permanent impact. And so if you were to inject water back into the ground, those soils aren't going to fluff back up and go back to where they were. This is just an overview of subsidence and how it relates to the California Aqueduct. So you'll see the image or the map on the right is a map of the State Water Project and the California Aqueduct being kind of the main spine of that system. The California Aqueduct delivers water to approximately 27 million people throughout the state, so it's extremely important in terms of water supply for the entire state of California. The city specifically receives State Water Project water from the coastal branch of the State Water Project, which is a turnout of the California Aqueduct. And again, if you look back at that map, in the lower right-hand corner, you see the blue stem that's coming off and delivering water to Santa Barbara County. So that's the coastal branch that we'll be talking about more today. Already, as a result of subsidence, about 44% of aqueduct capacity has been lost. And without any near-term repairs or action, we anticipate, or DWR anticipates, that up to 87% of capacity could be reduced in the next 10 years.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the aqueduct itself is a conduit. Mm-hmm. So you're saying leakage?
No, I'm actually going to show some pictures in a second. I'll show you. Not typically leakage. So give me 2 slides. So more specifically, how subsidence affects the California Aqueduct. The aqueduct is broken up into pools or segments, and each of those segments is roughly 10 miles long. And at the end of each pool, there's like a check gate that controls the flow of water from one pool to the next. And it also controls water surface elevation in the pool, so they can back up the water to keep it at whatever elevation they want to. Each pool has an elevation fall of 2 to 4 feet, so that allows the water to flow using gravity through the system. And as a result of subsidence, we're seeing decreases in the flow capacity of the system, as well as operational difficulties. And Commissioner Young, to kind of answer your question better, I think this illustrates it. So on the left, we have a healthy water table. And you can see the aqueduct there on the top. And if you look at the gray bottom edge of the aqueduct, it's nice and flat. And so the water is flowing freely through the aqueduct. And then if we look at the after picture on the right, the water table has dropped significantly due to pumping. And so then those soils have settled. And you can see that that bottom portion of the canal is no longer flat and free flowing. And so there's the illustration of the choke point where, you know, the part ahead of it has sunk. And now it doesn't flow as freely. So that's really what we're talking about in terms of loss of capacity in the aqueduct. So there are several impacts related to subsidence on the aqueduct. One of the primary ones is increased delivery costs. So because the capacity is reduced, the operators are needing to move water more often during on-peak electrical hours. So that increases operating costs because electricity is more expensive, and it also limits the ability of DWR to use renewable sources. And that's significant across the state since the energy affects the entire state. It also results in decreased reliability. So as the aqueduct sinks, like we saw in that picture, there's an increased risk that water will either go over the liner, which could result in erosion or damage to delivery structures, could result in loss of the water or flooding, or require emergency outages of the aqueduct. And then finally, there's increased operations and maintenance associated with addressing the subsidence issue. So we're looking at significant modifications and repairs to the conveyance facilities and structures. And unfortunately for the city and the Central Coast Water Authority, we're particularly susceptible to this issue because of where the subsidence is affecting the California aqueduct. And I'll show you this in a map in a slide or two. But where the coastal branch turns out from the California aqueduct, we're seeing settling between 7 and 8 feet already in that part of the canal from the original elevation. And so therefore, the water levels are coming really close to the top of the canal liner. And so what the operators are having to do is lower the amount of water that they're flowing through the canal, which reduces the capacity and the ability to deliver water to the coastal branch and CCWA. So this is a fairly detailed schematic, but what we're looking at here is across the top horizon are the different pools or reaches on the State Water Project. The gray jagged line is the, why am I forgetting? It's the top of the liner. And then the blue lines are the water within those pools. And so you can see the 3 red circles are where the difference in elevation between the top of the water and the top of the liner is 1 foot or less. So typically, DWR operators like to operate with at least 3 feet of freeboard, but in these cases, they're operating with just 1 foot so that they can try to maintain as much capacity as possible. And again, these are the 2 red circles to the right are located near the turnout of the coastal branch. And I'll show that in another slide too. So California Department of Water Resources has established the California Aqueduct Subsidence Program, or CASP, and their purpose is to develop or implement corrective and preventative measures to mitigate the effects of subsidence. Currently, they're working on planning cost-beneficial remediation to anticipated future subsidence. And so this is also another tricky part of this issue is almost like climate change. Even if we were able to stop all emissions today, we would still see rising temperatures, the effects of climate change. So subsidence is also sort of already in motion. And so even if we were able to stop, any future actions that would cause subsidence, we would still see some dropping of the surface for future years. And so recognizing that, they're developing interim actions to both reduce the impact of subsidence to water deliveries prior to then implementing more long-term solutions. And some of those interim actions are illustrated in this slide here. So on the left, you have a map. The star shows the turnout for the coastal branch off of the California aqueduct. So you can see it's kind of sandwiched between some of the problematic pools. And so the first steps in terms of interim action that have been identified are to raise the liner in pools 17, 18, 20, 21, 24, and 31. And I have an illustration of what that looks like in the next slide. And then they're also going to remove the check gates at check 17 because those are also impending capacity and flow. So this is that same map on the left, but then showing what the interim action of raising the liner looks like. So the figure 3.5, the top figure, shows the existing liner in gray within the water to the far right of the slide. And then what you see in the bottom illustration is that liner has been raised, and so it allows more water to flow through the canal without getting close to the top of that liner where you have those issues that we described earlier. So this is an extremely costly issue. It's been estimated by CASP that repairs to the aqueduct are going to be in the range of 3.9 billion over the next 10 years. Because some of these facilities are shared by both the federal government for the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project with the state, the costs have been allocated to each government proportionally, but the state share is really like 3/4 of that 3.9 billion, so super significant. And I guess I'll, before I go to the recommendation, say too that, you know, typically the way that billing works on the State Water Project is those that benefit from what's happening in that reach pay for those benefits or repairs. And so if all of these costs were bore upon the beneficiaries of the fix, that would be really significant to CCWA and the Central Coast because of where our turnout happens to be located. And so it's extremely important that we educate our legislators about this issue and have a holistic look at repairing the project because it does benefit most Californians as a whole, but it particularly impacts those of us that have water off the coastal branch. So we're recommending that Water Commission recommends that council directs the mayor to send letters to state and federal legislative representatives to include funding for subsidence-related water infrastructure repairs in the fiscal year 26-27 budget. And again, we anticipate that this is going to be an ongoing issue, so we want to continue to maintain these conversations with our legislators moving forward, make sure that they're aware of the issue and that this has appropriate funding.
Any estimate on what our share would be of the costs?
No, I don't think that they've come up with any cost structures that apply to any of the users of the State Water Project yet because they're really trying to look at statewide appropriations to that total cost first. And then I think as they understand what costs are going to be borne by the users of the State Water Project, that will start to get worked out.
And just to be clear, the almost 4 billion is just the interim actions, not the long-term ones?
I believe that that is true because they haven't even developed the solution
Yeah.
long-term yet.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
Just have a question. Is it from over pumping of the groundwater from the users in that area, but they aren't necessarily the beneficiaries of the water that's traveling in the aqueduct? Is that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Councilmember Stennin, and this has come up at Central Coast Water Authority, I think, every time we've heard this item. So in an ideal world, we would want those users of the groundwater basin in the Central Valley to have to fix what has been broken essentially by overpumping. And that is why the state passed SGMA in 2014, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And so the idea is that groundwater basins will be managed in a way that's sustainable moving forward. And so when I talk about the fact that some of this subsidence is happening, you know, regardless of if we could fix it in the future, SGMA should be that fix. So hopefully it won't continue to get worse. But being able to pinpoint, I mean, we can identify who those pumpers are, but we're talking like decades of lawsuits essentially. And in the meantime, we're losing capacity in the system, so we have to keep working on fixing it now.
Thank you. And then does SGMA take into account like a sustainable yield in and out, but does it take into account infrastructure damage in general, like from here on out?
No, I know that subsidence is one of the issues that they have to look at. So at least, you know, the effect of the soils. But then the next step is the effect of the infrastructure. That's not included in SGMA.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Any public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on this item.
So we do have a recommendation, right?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call. Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis.
Yes.
Chair Keller.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Good luck with that. Okay. So next item is the director's report, which will be presented by Ms. Corey.
Thank you, Chair Keller. I have extensive notes from Director Hegmark for the director's report this morning. In your packet, you'll see our normal graphs of production and consumption and slipcases, but some highlights from those numbers. We did use 30 acre-feet of blend water in the recycled water system this month. That's the most we've used since 2021, but this is because we've turned off the recycled water plant while we have surplus conditions at Cachuma. So that potable water is directly feeding our recycled water customers right now. That's still 30 acre-feet for the month is still really low demand. It's winter and it's raining, so our recycled water users aren't using a whole lot of water. We used Devil's Canyon in January for the first time since June 2024, and we'll continue to use it this winter as it is available. I know just last night they shut down diversions from Gibraltar and Devil's Canyon a few days ago because water quality was starting to be a concern with this current storm, but they'll get turned right back on as soon as water quality is acceptable. So it's exciting to be using those supplies. January production was almost exactly the same as last month. It was kind of interesting. So December 2025 total production was 360.59 acre feet, and January 2026 is 360.62 acre feet. That's pretty interesting given how wet December was and how dry January was weather-wise. And our water system total use was 666 acre feet, so pretty low. Rainfall in January ended up being pretty typical at Gibraltar, 5.49 inches. It's less than the 50-year average, but above the 50-year median. But overall, for the rainy season thus far, Gibraltar's gotten a total of 32.06 inches of rain, not including the storm that just started up again this morning. And the 50-year average at Gibraltar is 28.14 inches. So we've already surpassed the average thanks to the early season rains. No major damage from the recent storms, which is always nice. These ones have been a little bit less violent, although there has been some crazy winds. We're seeing more evidence of climate change. We have the wettest November on record and the second wettest December on record, and also the warmest January on record. So all within 3 months, some record-breaking rainfall and temperatures. Gibraltar and Cachuma continue to be in spill conditions, and water that we use from Cachuma during a spill doesn't count towards our allocation, so it's kind of like free water. As a result, we did idle both the recycled water plant and the desalination plant as of February 1st. Desal is scheduled to come back online in October 2026. And in the interim, it's allowing us to make some significant capital modifications and maintenance for the next 9 months. So it's really a nice window to be able to do some of that work. And the recycled water plant will bring back online once the spill conditions at Cachuma stop. And I already talked about that. We got bids for the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project. We had 3 bidders. The average bid was $42 million, which is 40% higher than the design engineer's estimate. So that was pretty disappointing. The major cost drivers appear to be concrete, labor, and trucking costs. And so we'll award the project based on best value selection, based on customer or contractor qualifications, contractor past performance, approach, cost, and schedule. And then once we've selected the contractor based on that best value selection, before we bring the contract to Water Commission and Council for award, we'll be seeking to negotiate scope and cost in order to find some sort of cost savings. We expect to bring it to Water Commission in April. In terms of revenues, January revenues for water came in 18% below projections. January revenue reflects water use in November since of the billing delay. So given the unusually high rainfall in November, that's not unexpected. Revenues are projected to end the year 5% below target, or negative $4 million. And in wastewater, we had January revenues in on target, and those revenues are projected to end the fiscal year 2% below target, or 700,000. And then some more general updates. We had a Vic Trace public meet and greet in late January. It was very well attended. We're finding that when we go to the neighborhood and set up, we really get great communication and feedback from the residents there. So we had 40 plus neighbors, 5 dogs, or maybe more. Joshua lost count. 8 city staff plus 2 city retirees, and 26 email subscribers were added to our ongoing updates for the project. Major discussion topics included drainage for La Vista del Oceano, construction schedule, noise and truck trips throughout the project, perimeter fencing, landscaping, water during construction, and fire protection during construction. In terms of negotiating the CMAR contract, we've reached an impasse in negotiating the contract with a selected contractor. We can't come to an agreement on the risk sharing under the CMAR contract. So you'll know that this was our first attempt at trying CMAR contracting after we got that opportunity from council. And we just couldn't come to an agreement on risk sharing. So we intend to go back out to bid with a new request for proposal, and we'll be tightening some of the contract language so that hopefully everybody comes to the negotiating table more on with a shared understanding so that we can get to a negotiated contract. And then that is the end of the director's report.
What's the cost savings in not running the desal plant for 8 months?
Luckily, Mr. Rare showed up today, and he can answer that question for you.
Good morning, Water Commission. Bradley Rare, Principal Project Manager. One of my core duties is to oversee the desal plant. So like Ms. Corey said, we've been analyzing those costs, and the largest cost savings that we'll get from curtailing the desal plant through October is our energy savings and chemical, and that's totaling about $1.5 million. Plus or minus a little bit, because some of the activities that we will be doing during that 8-month curtailment period may use some energy and chemical. We're looking at potentially piloting some new technologies for the pretreatment challenges we've had. And so that gives you kind of a ballpark. But the labor, is one of the largest costs for the desal plant, and we need to keep all those operators gainfully employed so that when we return into service in October, that they're there for us.
What are they going to be doing in the interim?
Great question. So some of our operations team that works for IDE will be transitioning to more maintenance technicians. So they'll be helping perform some heavy maintenance that is otherwise not able to be done when the plant is in operation. IDE, my understanding, has shifted their operational shift time. So they're not working overnight, but we have more people on plant during the day in order to help many hands make light work. So they're working on some of the work that IDE has already put into motion.
It's a small crew, right?
Correct.
4 or 5 people.
Yeah, we have 5 shift operators that cover the normal shift because it's a 24-hour operation. And so all those shift operators are reporting now daily instead of over the 24-hour shift.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Any public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on this
Okay,
item.
well, thank you very much. Record time. Okay, well, thank you, and this adjourns the meeting.
Good.
Thank you.
Good job, Arturo.
Yeah.